What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I am Roman, and I'm here to talk to you about The Old Guard 2, the long-awaited sequel to Netflix's 2020 action thriller, The Old Guard. This brings back Charlize Theron and much of the team of mercenaries with the special ability that they cannot die. They are immortals. Now, this movie also brought back screenwriter Greg Rucka, but the second one was also co-written by Sarah L. Walker. The Old Guard 2 was directed by Victoria Mahoney, whereas the first one was directed by Gina Prince Blythewood. So it did go in a different direction. What I will say about this second movie is that it did strike more of a personal note than the first one. I have seen reviews that this one is not doing nearly as well, not as nearly as well received as the first one. For reference, The Old Guard featured an 80% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 71% popcorn meter. It's an audience score, whereas the sequel is, according to Rotten Tomatoes, rotten with a 25% rating from Rotten Tomatoes and a 42% popcorn meter. So the scores are wildly different on these two movies. Personally, I believed that The Old Guard is still one of the best movies that Netflix has put out, one of the best Netflix originals that we've seen. So this was a highly anticipated sequel, and therein lies the problem. I've heard reports that if you're someone that's trying to shop a movie or a show to any of the streaming services, that Netflix is a bit harder to get because there might be a bit of a superiority complex with Netflix, and this 5-year release window with The Old Guard reeks of that. We've seen with shows, seasons of shows where there's a 3-year difference. We've seen shows get canceled on streaming because fans just aren't as interested as they were because the windows is too long. And sometimes to me, it feels like Netflix is just like, you'll wait as long as we tell you to wait because we're Netflix and we're awesome. And that's what it felt like here. I will say that I thought the opening sequence of The Old Guard 2 was the high point of the movie. Not to say it was all downhill from there because I enjoyed the movie, but I think this boils down to this 5-year release window. But before we get there, as I mentioned, this does strike more of a personal note than the original because it centers much around the return of Quinn, who was the first immortal that Andy found and began to work with centuries ago. But we learned in the first movie, at least we thought, that she was the first immortal to die because she had been chained up in an iron coffin and dropped into the ocean. But we find out in the final scenes of the first movie that Quinn is alive. She appears to Booker. And so this movie picks up right where that one left off. We even see that final scene again towards the beginning of this movie. And it turns out that Quinn blames Andy, played by Charlize Theron, for leaving her there, for not coming to find her. And she has gotten in line with Discord, played by Uma Thurman, who is new to this sequel and is also a former immortal who has learned that she is no longer immortal, but is also chasing down Niall, played by Kiki Lane, who in the first movie was the newcomer to the team, because Discord realizes that Niall is the final immortal. And as the final immortal, as we learned from the first movie, Niall had the ability to turn Andy mortal because she wounded her. And so when we pick up in the second movie, Andy is mortal. And as we learn later in the second movie, so is Discord. And Discord has figured out that if she can get Niall to kill the rest of the immortals and then transfer the power to her, she can once again become immortal. And so that is the plot of this film, basically. But as I said, it strikes a personal tone because it's Quinn wrestling with how she feels about Andy and the former team versus what she thinks Discord is up to. And the whole mortal versus immortal storyline with Niall comes into play because Andy, as I mentioned, is now mortal. And while she once said that she was glad that her time was up because it was exhausting to be immortal, she then starts to change her feeling about that. And so the team tries to find ways to reinstate her immortal status. And Tua, played by sequel newcomer Henry Golding, realizes what Discord realizes, that Nile is the final and therefore is also known as a destroyer. As I mentioned, that she can end somebody's immortal status and hand it over to someone else. So they come up with the idea, Tua and Booker come up with the idea that if one of us is willing to make that sacrifice and let Nile wound us, that we can make Andy immortal again. So there's a scene where the three of them are fighting, and it looks like Tua's plan is to let it be him, but then Booker gets himself wounded, makes the sacrifice, becomes mortal, gives the power back over to Andy, and then towards the end of the film makes the ultimate sacrifices and dies for the final time. It's very convoluted, but all that to say, I enjoyed this movie. As I've mentioned before, it had a personal touch. You get to know these characters on a human level a little bit better. The opening sequence was awesome. The action sequences were on par with the original, but I don't think this is, at least to me, this is not an instance of the movie being bad. This is an instance of there being a 5-year wait. And when you have build up like this movie did, when you have as well received as the first movie was, and then as long as the wait was, the expectations are going to go sky high. And then what's going to happen? I think this movie will be better received in a year when people have a chance to go back and watch it. I even had to go back and watch the original movie just to be reminded of some of the smaller plot points. I'll tell you guys a story really quick as to why I think this movie isn't doing as well. One of the best superhero movies ever made, I don't think it's arguable, is Dark Knight. So when they announced that Dark Knight Rises was coming out, everybody was, for obvious reasons, excited about this movie, couldn't wait. The anticipation was palpable. And when the movie finally came out, at least for me, when I first watched it, The Dark Knight Rises, I was disappointed because my expectations had gone unrealistically high. And so there was nowhere for the movie to go but below my expectations. Then I caught the movie again about a year later on TV, and I said, you know what? This movie is actually really good. And that's just a personal anecdote, but I think this is what this movie is suffering from. Is I think on its own, it's a good movie, but the fact that it's a sequel and we had to wait 5 years for it, I don't think it lived up to expectation, because expectation might have been a little bit unrealistic. But at least for me, my personal opinion, I enjoyed this movie. There were parts of it that I enjoyed better than the original, and there were parts of it that I enjoyed not as much as the original. But I do think that opening sequence was quite awesome. And there was one review that I saw that stuck out, and when I got to the end of the movie, it made sense to me. They said that it had good action, but the movie suffers from taking too long to set up a possible sequel, as in the Old Guard 3. And I will say that it did, because when it comes to the end of the movie, spoilers, Andy and Quinn make up and they go to stop Discord and save the rest of the team, who has been, each surviving member of the team has been put on a different plane and flown in a different direction. So they're all scattered so that Andy and Quinn cannot save them all at once. And the movie ends with Andy asking Quinn, are you going to fight by my side or not? And Quinn says, no, you're going to fight by my side. I always go in first. Andy says, not anymore, because she's now the leader of the team. And that's where the movie ends. I was expecting a big showdown to end the movie, and instead got the opening for a third movie. And if Netflix thinks we're going to wait another 5 years for Old Guard 3 and be just as excited about it, they're sorely mistaken. Hopefully they learn from this and they fast track Old Guard 3, as they should have done with the Old Guard, because I still think it's one of the best movies Netflix has ever churned out. But who knows? I may see you right back here on this channel in 2030 to review the Old Guard 3 from Netflix. But until then, let us know in the comments what you thought of Old Guard 2. Are you excited for it? If you've seen it, does it hold up to the original? Or did it fall flat because of the 5-year wait or for another reason? Again, let us know in the comments. Until then, I am Roman for Fandom Fix, and we'll see you on the next one.